Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a good conversation this morning and get your juices flowing around advanced teaching roles. We are now going to just spend about 10 minutes just sharing a little bit of, if there was something that you heard in your conversation that was interesting, if there's something in your district that you are doing innovative or something new, something that you've done in 2020 to adapt to COVID. We just want to have an opportunity to share out just anything that might be good for the group to hear. So if you would like to, I believe you guys can unmute yourselves. So if you are, you have something worth sharing, we'll just open the floor now if you want to unmute yourself and just jump in and share something.
I can jump in for my group. I was fortunate enough to be with Stephanie from Public Impact, and she was talking about their work to create a full year paid teacher residency. And they're pushing that out in Texas and hope to get that pushed out in North Carolina as well. So that was interesting to hear about, as well as Amy, who was formerly with Guilford County, but now at High Point University, was talking about some grad certificate programs that would be aligned with instructional coaching. So that was interesting to hear about as well. And then last but not least, Lori with Union County was talking about they recently got their EPIC grant renewed, and they are working towards identifying a cohort for their pipeline. So everybody's been really busy.
Excellent. Thanks, Amy, for sharing. I don't know if anybody that she mentions wants to elaborate on any of those things, or if we have other ideas that they might want to lift up for the group. Stephanie, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that residency idea. That's intriguing.
Sure. So it's something that lots of our opportunity culture districts have expressed interest in over the years. In Texas, we have a situation where we're working with US Prep, which is one of those transformation centers. So we have a cohort of ed prep providers who have already committed themselves to shifting their programs to include a full year clinical experience for teacher candidates. So when we are able to start with districts in Texas in opportunity culture design, as they're creating their advanced teacher role with the paraprofessional on the team, we're doing it intentionally to make that paraprofessional role a full year residency placement for undergraduate candidates. So that's been pretty exciting work. And we just had this is our first year of implementation. We designed last year, and there are 15 candidates in our first site. And we've got 5 additional sites that have signed up to do the design work this year. So it should grow pretty quickly. We're excited about that.
Awesome. That's really interesting and a great idea and a way to connect teacher prep with advanced teaching roles. That's fabulous. So we will look forward to hearing you share about that as it gets a little farther along in Texas and maybe an opportunity in North Carolina. So great. Others who would like to share anything interesting, new that you're doing, or pose a question to the group if you'd like.
So this is Erin. Oh,
you go right ahead, Erin. I'll go after Erin.
Sure. Hey, Robert. So Erin from Edgecombe, our group had some discussion just around, how we're kind of shifting our approach here in 2020 in this remote world. And so Cindy from Vance County and I shared that, we're thinking a lot about how we support our MCLs, our multi-classroom leaders, to coach from a distance and to, take on some kind of different responsibilities this year so that they can be sure that all the teachers that they work with are really well equipped to operate effectively in a remote environment. So we've been focusing there. Geneva and Pam from Northampton were in our group as well, and they're really in the design process now. So they have been spending this semester really looking at potential candidates for their advanced roles and trying to find the right folks who can operate in this new world and support teachers effectively. And then just as we were coming back to the main group, Debbie was sharing, I think, something really interesting specifically around, how everybody is taking on, different roles and more roles this year in this remote environment. So Debbie, do you mind jumping in and finishing that thought?
Sure, no, not a problem. I just think from the outside looking in conversations with educators and principals, et cetera, that there's so many people that are, I get concerned about burnout. And I think that everybody is concerned about the multiple roles and the multiple hats that everyone is having to wear. And I think we have to look particularly hard at the multi-classroom leaders, because they've taken on even that additional layer, and then just kind of wondering what the systems are doing to provide that emotional support and that additional layer of just communication with these teachers to make sure that they are being taken care of personally.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a front of mind for, all the educators are in this totally unprecedented time and still expected to deliver just like, we expect them to when they're in the classroom. And it's a huge challenge. I don't know if any districts have anything in particular you might have done to support MCLs differently this year that you might want to lift up. Erin, you kind of touched on it, but.
Cindy, I'll tell you, one of the things that we really are trying to focus on is the idea that our operating system has to change. It has to be based upon culture. So if our operating system is based around the culture that we want to create, one that will sustain itself as we move forward, then we are beginning to figure out how to navigate, how to clarify roles for the multi-classroom leaders, reclarification of the roles for a leader in a remote world or a virtual world or a digital world, whatever phrase you want to talk about. And we really are trying to look at this as it's not about remote learning or virtual learning. It's just about learning. And if we start with that basic fundamental belief, it's about learning and make it work, then we're beginning to sort of open up some different avenues where people are beginning to feel a little more comfortable if they make a mistake or if they fail. This is new and uncharted territory. We're not turning back, nor do we want to. I think even looking at districts where we have all students back in the building, or they're in a hybrid model, or here in Vance, we're still 100% remote and will be through our first semester. We're looking forward to what we will do next. Should we remain this way or when we transition? We're not designing anything for a face-to-face world or a fully virtual world. We're designing it so that it could work in an educational ecosystem that is ever changing. And so we're trying to talk in that manner so that people don't feel like we're planning for today, but tomorrow we'll need a new plan. We're planning for the teaching and learning process, wherever it might be and however it might take place.
That's great to hear, Cindy. Thank you for sharing that. Robert, I think you had something.
Yes, so there's a need that emerged from our group, Leah, and it might be something, Leah, that you and Brenda and Tom pulled together. It might be something that exists and then we're just not aware of it. So as the folks in my group were talking with their budget folks in their district, there are certain flexibilities and things that are allowable related to money and how money gets utilized. There seem to be differences in what district finance people are aware of with regard to those flexibilities. So if there were a single document, a one-pager or the place where they could go so that the information that is necessary for finance officers to be aware of doesn't have to be conveyed second or third hand through the implementers of these advanced teaching roles programs. There's a perception that some programs in some districts are being able to fully avail themselves to those flexibilities because their budget folks are aware of them or willing to take the time to learn them, and then others are not in that level of opportunity because the budget people don't know, aren't willing to find out, or aren't able to get the information. So anything we could do to get that information more accessible so that it could be conveyed to budget folks would benefit at least the 4 people that were in my room.
That's a great idea, Robert. And I know there are some experts who are implementing that are having those conversations with their HR or their finance folks that could help. So perhaps a collaborative effort to put together something that's clear, direct, but allows districts to capitalize on these flexibilities. That's a great idea. I've made a note. So hopefully that can be something we can look forward to in the future. Other things to share or lift up?
Leah, this is Seth Brown from Pitt, and to sort of piggyback a little bit on what Robert was saying is because that's what we are going through right now in Pitt is not really sustainment, because for us in particular, we were saying we can't sustain several $1 million a year out of just local budget. We call it transition. So how do we transition and focus on what's really working, and how do we make sure we highlight, I think, what Robert talked about. And I think there's some work already. I know that in different counties, whether it's Charlotte or Edgecombe, in different counties, of how do we fund things differently. And a lot of that work, I think, comes out of public impact on thinking differently. But when you talk about thinking differently in finance, people get really scared. So it's this matter of how do we think differently about just even the terminology of that, and how do we make sure that we frame the benefits. So for example, if class size reduction is something that we can highlight, and a county's looking at, in order to meet the class size reduction guidelines, if we're having to build a school and a school is $18 million, we can either, as a group of county commissioners, are we going to fund a school in order to meet these class size reduction waivers or things, especially for the lower grades, or can we invest that money in advanced teaching roles and have a bigger impact in different ways, thinking differently? And so it's highlighting the potential benefits that has really helped us and our district leadership think differently about how to continue to fund this as we transition from grant funds to sustaining funds. So just that thought. The other thing from our group is that we had several counties that are newer in this process, and we call it iterations of applying. So just because you don't get the grant the first time, you learn from it. How do you connect? And that was, I think, our overall theme is really just that iterative process of continuing to think through. And just because the first time you don't get any funds doesn't mean you don't keep moving forward. In Pitt, I didn't say this in our group, but in Pitt, our early mantra was, we're not waiting on Raleigh. And I think that mindset helped us continue to move forward and not rely on grant funds. We just keep moving forward. So, yeah.
Yeah, and there are some, Seth is a great example of someone who's been doing this for a couple of years, several years actually, and, could provide some insights onto proposals and things like that. But one great thing that we're really excited about with the policy change is there will be an annual opportunity now. And so, whereas when we started this in 2016, we were waiting for funding to have an RFP, now there will be an annual opportunity for proposals. And so districts do get that chance to refine and come back. We believe it's a worthwhile venture. And so hopefully districts will continue to iterate and get a proposal that's successful. And we're looking forward to, next year is not a great year for funding, as Brenda mentioned, but we're looking forward to, infusing more grant funds, and hopefully the state will support us on that as the years go on. So any final thoughts before we move on to our next presentation? And actually, Aaron, I did want to ask Aaron Swanson if you wouldn't mind lifting up the open house about the roles that you did. I thought that was just a great communication strategy, pre-COVID communication strategy.
Sure. Yeah. So this was definitely pre-COVID, but last year we held an open house for any teachers in our district or any teachers coming from other places that might be interested in an advanced role. And we did it at one of our schools, and we had kind of a brief presentation about advanced roles and our goals for the initiative and what all of the roles are responsible for. And then we had a table set up for each of the schools. So in some ways it was kind of like a hiring fair type of event where the principal and a teacher leader, a current teacher leader from each school was there, and the potential candidates or folks who were interested interested could go from table to table to learn about the roles. It was pretty well attended, and we did have several applications that came from that event. So I think just really being able to meet their potential principals and colleagues was really helpful for the candidates, and then to learn firsthand about what kinds of roles they would be taking on. They said that was just extremely helpful in the application process. I could also see how you could do that virtually. I mean, we didn't do it virtually this year, but I definitely think there's a world in which that could be effective, and you could even move people into breakout rooms so they could talk about the different roles or hear from the different principals. Yeah, I think it's a good strategy, and I'm glad to support anybody who's interested in that. It looks like Cindy in Vance County has also done this, and so I'm sure either of us would be helpful to share more.
Thanks, Erin. Yeah, we've heard a lot about how important it is to communicate around what are the roles, how is your school going to change, and that reduces people's fear and anxiety about this new role or just this new model altogether. So the idea that you can provide a space to learn about it is great. So thank you for sharing, Erin and Cindy. Glad that was successful for you guys as well in Vance. So I'm so grateful for you guys leaning into the conversation, and hope that was helpful, and hopefully you can continue to make connections throughout the day.